Guten Morgen und herzlich willkommen zu Now German Lektion 63, Lesson 63. Hey she.
Guten Morgen. Welcome, everyone. Hi, Gregor.
You might not know it yet, but this is actually a big lesson because we now start talking about the past. And for this and the next 7 lessons, or 8 including this, we'll focus only on building past tense. And the first past that we build is called perfect. There are actually 3 different past tenses, but this is the one that we use most often. And we also use it most often specifically in spoken language. So if you want to speak in German and you want to talk about anything that happened in the past, you need to use this tense. So, for example, what did you do yesterday?
Ich habe gearbeitet.
Yes, you're already building the past tense here. She said, I worked. Or if I say, I listened to music, I can say, ich habe Musik gehört. But we'll talk more about building it in a second. Let's first look at our dialogue.
Was hast du gestern gemacht?
Ich habe Sport gemacht. Ich habe ein Buch gekauft. Ich habe einen Podcast gehört. Und was hast du gestern gemacht?
Ich habe gearbeitet. Ich habe Musik gehört. Und ich habe Deutsch gelernt.
Yes, let's look at the vocabulary first. We have was.
Was?
That is what. We saw it a lot. And haben.
Haben.
To have. I mention it because you will need it a lot to build this perfect tense. And then gestern.
Gestern.
That is yesterday. Do you remember what is today and tomorrow in German?
Heute is today.
Yes.
And morgen is tomorrow.
Yes. And finally, we can also talk about gestern because you probably need the past tense. Without past tense, you can't properly use this word. So now it's finally time. And then we have our also classic word machen.
Machen.
To do, to make. And what we call the Partizip 2 of machen is gemacht.
Gemacht.
Yes. And we'll also talk more about what is Partizip 2 in the grammar section of this lesson and also in a specific lesson about all these grammar terms a few lessons later. And then we have der Sport.
Der Sport.
Which is sport, not too hard to guess. And das Buch.
Das Buch.
Yes, the book. And another favorite verb of many people, kaufen.
Kaufen.
To buy. Do you know what is the Partizip 2 of kaufen?
Gekauft.
That's right, gekauft. It's right there. And we'll look at how to build that also in the grammar. And we have der Podcast.
Der Podcast.
Which is, of course, podcast. And a few more. Hören.
Hören.
To hear. That becomes gehört.
Gehört.
That is the Partizip 2. And arbeiten.
Arbeiten.
To work. That's what you mentioned in the introduction already. And the Partizip 2 is gearbeitet.
Gearbeitet.
Yes. And we have die Musik.
Die Musik.
That is music. And das Deutsch.
Das Deutsch.
What we are all learning here is, of course, German. And exactly that's the next verb, lernen.
Lernen.
To study or to learn. And the partizip is gelernt.
Gelernt.
Okay. Any questions about this vocab?
What's the meaning of Partizip 2?
Good question. And we'll answer this in the grammar section. So before I answer your question, let's go look at our dialogue one more time.
Was hast du gestern gemacht?
Ich habe Sport gemacht. Ich habe ein Buch gekauft. Ich habe einen Podcast gehört. Und was hast du gestern gemacht?
Ich habe gearbeitet. Ich habe Musik gehört. Und ich habe Deutsch gelernt.
Yes, great. And now we look at how we build the perfect tense. And there are many different ways how to build the perfect tense. And in this lesson, we are going to look at the most standard way how to build the perfect tense. We need another verb, which is in this case always haben. And with regular verbs, we always get the standard conjugation. So let's look at one example. So if we have the verb machen, to do, then how you build the perfect tense is first you look at how to conjugate it in the he form, which is in this case, for example, macht. So you can think through your head, ich mache, du machst, macht, you conjugate it and you stop at and then you simply use this macht and you add two letters in front, ge, and you have gemacht. And this gemacht, that is what we call Partizip 2. And why it's called Partizip 2 is because there is also another kind of state of a verb that is called Partizip 1, but it's not that relevant for A1. So that's why you only need to worry about Partizip 2 right now. And this is gemacht. And then to build a sentence with this verb machen in the past, you always use the Hilfsverb haben. So for example, I do or I did in the past, then with perfect is ich habe gemacht. Does that make sense so far?
Yes. Okay.
Does that
So
answer your question?
so this is just a format for the perfect tense, and it's because there are two formats, and we are now focusing on the second format. So it's called Partizip 2, and we will slowly introduce the Partizip 1 in the future.
Partizip 1, you don't need to know it for a long, long time. So you can think of Partizip 2 as fixed term. It's in English, it's called past participle. That's the English name for it. And in German, we call it perfect. We call it Partizip 2. You don't
Okay.
need to really worry. If that name bothers you, you can also ignore it and you can just think about it as perfect verb conjugation.
Okay. Got
Okay,
it.
so yeah.
And another question that I have is so this format haben like haben gemacht, haben gearbeitet is actually represent the past tense. So when we translate in English, that only means I worked instead of I have worked. Because in English they have two different type. One is I worked representing the past, and what I have worked that represent in the past I accomplish something. That's the perfect tense. How does that match with the English translation? Just want to clarify.
Yes. So, as I mentioned, there are 3 different past tense in German, but the good news is that the kind of differences between them are not relevant in spoken language. We use perfect almost always in spoken language, no matter what we are talking about. And in theory, perfect, that means already the word perfect, that means that something is completed. So if you ask a grammarian what is the history of this tense, is that something should be completed, but in reality, it's not that relevant. In spoken language, for sure. And in written language, we'll see about these differences at a later point when we introduce other forms of the past as well. But right now, you can see it as a kind of a tool for all the different things that happen in the past.
Okay, so so current German haben gemacht represent either made or have making.
You can, if you want to think about these connections to English, you can think about it that way. I would recommend you think about it more first principle. Everything that happened in the past, like more than 1 second ago, and you talk about it, is in the past. And if you have something that has a connection to the present, you might occasionally use the present tense. So for example, if I have this phone, ich habe dieses Telefon, of course, I also have it now. So it's connected to the present, then I use the present tense. But that's also true in English, right? So
yeah. Okay.
yeah.
Cool.
All right. let's quickly look at a few other perfect verbs then that we saw in this dialogue. So first we had machen. How about I give you the infinitive and you can tell me the partizip in the third person singular as hat, blah, blah. So first machen.
Er macht. Er hat gemacht.
Yes, and this is a good trick what you are doing right here. You can, as an intermediate step, you can indeed do the third person singular conjugation present tense, and then you go to the perfect, because that is for regular verb really how you can build them very easily, step by step, always adding only one thing at a time. Okay, and then the same for kaufen, to buy.
Kaufen. Er kauft. Er hat gekauft.
That's right. And hören, to hear or to listen.
Hören. Er hört. Er hat gehört.
That's right. And arbeiten or to work.
Arbeiten. Er arbeitet. Er hat gearbeitet.
And lastly, lernen, to learn or to study.
Lernen. Er lernt. Er hat gelernt.
Yes. All right. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Good. Then let's look at our dialogue one more time.
Was hast du gestern gemacht?
Ich habe Sport gemacht. Ich habe ein Buch gekauft. Ich habe einen Podcast gehört. Und was hast du gestern gemacht?
Ich habe gearbeitet. Ich habe Musik gehört und ich habe Deutsch gelernt.
Before we continue, let me point out one more thing. In the last two lessons, we looked at modal verbs, können and wollen. And what we saw there is that the verb that has the meaning of the sentence always goes to the end of the sentence. For example, ich will Kaffee trinken, right? And it's exactly the same here with partizip or with partizip 2 in the perfect tense. The verb that has the meaning goes to the end, and the conjugated verb haben in this case takes the verb position. So in this dialogue, we saw there are a lot of statements, so then it's always in position 2, or of course for a question, it would take position 1. And we'll talk about sentence positioning in perfect tense some more in a dedicated lesson, but I just wanted to mention that already here, so is introduced. All right, and that was Ich habe Musik gehört. All right. What did you do 2 days ago?
Ich habe gearbeitet auch.
You can say, ich habe auch gearbeitet.
Ich habe auch gearbeitet.
Yes, very good. Okay, we'll look more at perfect tense in the next 7 lessons, so you'll get a lot of chance to practice and learn about all the different conjugation forms, and we'll see you in the next one. Tschüss.
Tschüss.